Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. Thank you so much for dropping by this video. To those who are watching the recording of it and those who are joining in live. And the reason I say thank you is I am utterly convinced that the topic I'm going to talk about is of utmost importance for peace on earth. In fact, I'm utterly convinced that it's really the only solution that's going to bring peace on earth. That's a very bold claim, and I'm curious if by the end of it you agree with me. So, some things that I'm going to talk about have some specific details that maybe not everyone will resonate with, and that's okay. They're just the specific words or um, sort of details that make sense to me. But what really I'm going to talk about is universal spiritual principles today. That's what's most important. That's what is going to literally remove all suffering, solve all problems here on this earth is these universal spiritual principles. At least I'm utterly and completely convinced of that. And I got to tell you, almost every day I become more so convinced of that. So to share these things, I'm going to, as I said, talk about some specific things. I'm going to talk about Jesus, which for many people is a loaded topic, and I understand why. Um, and I'm also going to talk about a man named Bruno Gröning, who was active in most people on this planet haven't heard of him. He was one of the greatest healers to ever walk on this earth. He was active in post-World War II Germany, and we don't know how many people experienced spontaneous remission of illness in his presence. You know, a reasonable estimate might be 50,000 people over a 10-year period. And that honestly feels a little conservative. And you know, you may want to have nothing to do with Jesus. You may be like, this Bruno Gröning guy sounds weird. I don't want anything to do with him. That's fine. And the reason why I mention them is because what I'm sharing is, according to Bruno Gröning, the actual teachings of Jesus Christ. And you know, my understanding is that Christ didn't come to found a religion. He came to teach us a way of life. And that way of life, in my view, has been sort of clouded over and covered over, very soon after Christ left his body. And Bruno Gröning said that in essence, he came to remind us of what that way of life is. And that's what I'm going to be doing today, is sharing the way of life that Jesus Christ called us to and that Bruno Gröning came to remind us of. So again, it doesn't matter to me what religion you are. It doesn't matter to me your view of Jesus Christ. If you think he is God, if you think he's the Son of God, doesn't matter to me what religion you are. What I am here to share is not a theology. What I'm here to share is a practical, spiritual way of life that can solve all of our problems individually. And again, I'm utterly convinced is really the only world solution that can solve all of the problems that this world is up against. So thank you so much for being willing to listen, because I want to live on a world where peace prevails and where health prevails, free of all problems. And I'm convinced it's inevitable, and I'm convinced that through us as individuals applying these teachings, that we can help it come about sooner. So, first and foremost, we all need energy to live. It's a basic human fact that we can't even take a single breath without life force. We can't even lift a spoon to our mouth or take a sip of water without the energy to move our arm. The question is, where does this energy come from? Most people think that it comes from eating, drinking, and sleeping. However, um, since even before written history, many cultures and wise beings, and I'm convinced that Christ was one of them, and that just wasn't very heavily emphasized in the written record we have of his teachings, has said that uh, man does not live, human beings do not live on food and drink alone. That there's this underlying life force, a sacred, divine life force that's absolutely essential to life. Bruno Gröning, and I'm convinced that Christ taught people how to directly absorb this energy, and that for whatever reason wasn't included in the written record we have of his teachings. And Bruno Gröning very clearly taught people how to absorb this energy. And through absorbing it, I and tens of thousands of people have had literally spontaneous remission of medically incurable illnesses. So, how to take it in? It's very simple. Please sit with your legs uncrossed, feet flat on the floor, hands on your legs, palms facing upwards, back in an upright position. Not stiff, but not slouched over, just a nice, relaxed position. Then please close your eyes. If you want to, take a deep breath. And now hand over all worries, all fears, all resentments, any life situations you feel stressful about. Handing them over to your understanding of a higher power or a spiritual helper you trust, such as Jesus. And if you don't have a helper, I have found Bruno Gröning to be a fierce friend and spiritual helper. You can hand your problems over to him. And also separating yourself from the idea of illness. What I mean by that is, for example, if you have a headache, please remove the idea, I have a headache, or something's wrong, or I'm sick. Just give that thought away. Give away the belief, the judgment of illness. The sensations may remain, but what I'm asking is that you give away the thought of illness. And now focus your entire attention on your healing. Truly believing that healing is happening, healing is coming. Then ask to receive the divine life energy. And observe your body, having the will, the intention to take this energy in. Noticing what you feel, trusting that every sensation you feel is the energy of God healing your body, reorganizing your body, freeing your body from everything not good. So we're going to spend a little time in silence. I'll come in with reminders. The practice is to observe your body, knowing, trusting that every sensation is healing happening. Noticing what you're feeling, having the intention to take this energy in. So, how on earth is it possible? How on earth is it possible that all problems, first of all, individually, that all our individual problems, much less all problems in this world, can be healed or resolved? How is such a thing possible? Well, we to recognize that, what we need to do, and it's one of the hardest things for human beings to do, is to recognize how small we are. Of course, we each have our own lives, and of course, there's all these details and all these to-do lists and challenges that seem so big. But the truth of it is our us as human beings and our problems are quite minuscule. They're quite minuscule compared to, say, for example, the size of the earth. However, we don't see things accurately or correctly. We think, oh, my problems are so big, and get spun out. It's a very unhealthy habit that I'm in the process of breaking, and I think pretty much most human beings to some extent are. This becomes really important, however, when contemplating the solution to our problems, because according to Christ, there is a power that can take care of every single problem, that can absolutely help and heal every single problem we have. However, if we're stuck in the perspective that our problems are so big, we're not going to turn to that solution, to that power. Also, we have the very bad habit of trying to um, take care of everything on our own. In modern civilization, that's considered the mark of maturity, and it's considered great wisdom to be self sufficient. Well, Jesus very clearly pointed out, and Bruno Gröning reminded us, that no one is self sufficient, that we're all utterly dependent on God, and that in fact, we're not just dependent on God, we are children of God. Now, I used to think child of God was some kind of like spiritual belief, like, oh, I'm a child of God, meaning I'm made from God and I have the divine essence within me. And that's certainly part of it. But what I'm realizing more and more is it's an attitude of being in complete surrender, being in complete dependence and reliance on God. because all these individual problems that seem so big of us are quite small compared to God. Let's say, a person who has so many problems. Let's say they have financial problems, health problems, emotional problems, relationship problems. Let's say every area of their life is a mess. Well, that could seem like a big deal, but all those problems compared to God is like a speck of dust in the ocean. The problems being the speck of dust, the ocean being God. So let's spend a little time reflecting on how small we are, maybe more importantly, how small our problems are, and how big infinite, eternal love, existence, life itself, the Creator is. And let's turn towards it and, like little children, ask for help. Observing the body, recognizing our need and dependence on God, turning towards that power and asking for help. Observing the body, really trusting that every sensation is the power of God working within us, healing us, giving away any thoughts of illness or burden or problem. Hmm. So, how to access this power? Well, part of it is the simple practice we're doing right now, tuning in. But another essential component of it is to have faith, to have true faith. Now, that word is such, I hated the word faith for many years because to me, what I had been taught was that faith meant belief in a certain doctrine, which I didn't actually know whether it was true or not, but I had to believe in it. And if I didn't believe in it, horrible things would happen to me. That's what faith, that in the tradition I was raised in, that's what faith was. And I think that's true for many people, that they're sort of threatened that, hey, you need to believe this thing. And if you don't, you're not allowed to question it. And if you don't believe it or if you question it, horrible things are going to happen to you. So faith is one of the most important things to us as human beings. And like many other things on this planet, it's been twisted around to where it's so okay. So, what is true faith? Well, Bruno Gröning made it very, very simple and clear what faith is. Faith is first and foremost really believing and trusting in God, that God is all good and only good and doesn't punish. Said another way, it's um, having utter confidence in God. Now, each one of us here has our own sort of metaphysical, religious, or spiritual beliefs. So maybe we'll tag more things onto that, such as, and God's name is, and the nature of God is, and Jesus Christ is. Well, okay, that's personal, and that's each person is welcome to have. I would call those things beliefs, but that's not what Bruno Gröning meant by faith, and I'm utterly convinced that's not what Christ meant by faith. It's written that Christ spoke of, um, saying, "Hey, why are you worried about anything? God takes care of God takes care of the animals. Like the animals have all their needs met. How much more so will you be taken care of?" That's my understanding of what faith is. I think of it like how I feel towards a really good friend. Um, I just trust, and I'm thinking of a specific friend. I just trust her goodness. I know she'll be there for me if, to the best of her ability, if if I need help. Like she's someone I can rely on, and that is my understanding of faith, what Christ meant by faith. But don't take my word for it, please. Let's take a few minutes and do this practice a little bit more and ask God. Don't that's the problem is that most of the definitions that we've been given of faith have to do with following a person, a book, an organization, or a church. I don't believe that has anything to do with faith at all. My understanding of the faith that Christ called us to, that those things can be supportive of, but faith is all about trusting in God that will be taken care of. Just like that beautiful declaration that it's written that Jesus gave. In essence, God takes care of the animals and you're more precious than them. How much more so will God take care of you? So let's spend a little time reflecting, asking if that's true, seeing how we feel. Is God reliable? it's okay with it's okay with me you believe what you believe. And I mean, this world is full of we all have our own different belief systems. And the clarification of what faith is of utmost important utmost importance for us as individuals and for this planet, because people are basically fighting over belief systems, saying my belief system's right. This is a belief system is not going to solve our individual problems, much less the world problems. I'm not trying to talk anyone out of their belief systems or not have particular beliefs, but it's absolutely essential that we all. Bruno Gröning said that peace on, let's see if I can find it. In essence, he said that peace will be on this earth, come on this earth when true faith is understood. So I'm just gonna have to go with my memory. That's the essence of what he said. The reason why is my understanding of what he meant by that is, true faith is trusting in God, relying on God. And so from that place, then that leads to a whole different life, which Bruno Gröning also spoke of. He said it's not enough to just say, I believe. You have to put belief into deeds. So it's not about, and this is how I was raised, it's not about just holding a belief and then going and living your life and the two being sort of separate. It's about having a faith and a reliance on a higher power and then living a life completely based on that, completely based around that. And of course, I'm growing towards that. I haven't perfected this. Bruno Gröning spoke about the spiritual life, and the German word he used was afflict, which is a mandatory obligation. Could be called duty, but the word duty isn't even strong enough. And he spoke of it, he called it a Schuldigkeit, which is a German word not used so much. It's kind of a proverbial word of like giving your whole being to something, giving to where what you're doing is just a fulfillment of your function. And what specifically did he say is our mandatory obligation, and what should we give our whole life to? Being in communion with God and acting from that, being led by God, guided by. And so, as you can see, this is how I'm able to make the bold claim that what I'm talking about can solve all of our problems. If this whole world sought to to trust in God, to give their whole life to being guided by God, that's where our solution lies, friends. And to being in communion and connection with this force, this power, this goodness, and being guided by it. That's what Christ came to teach us. And that message got obscured. And Bruno Gröning said, if people had gotten the message 2,000 years ago, I wouldn't have needed to come. So once again, it's okay to have, I'm very passionate about things religious and spiritual. I have my own beliefs, and but I put those secondary to having a fundamental trust and reliance on God. And I watch which beliefs help me to trust God more and which beliefs make me a more effective instrument of God, servant of God. And the ones that it seem to interfere with that, I let them go. So I'm going to begin wrapping up. Once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everyone who joined in live and everyone who watched this video, because I want to live in the world that was meant to be. I want to live in a world that's under God's guidance. What does that mean? Paradise on earth, heaven on earth. That's what this earth was designed for. Go take a look at nature. Go take a look at a beautiful tree or a forest, and you can hear and feel. Maybe not hear the words, but you can feel what's natural, what's God's will is. And it's goodness, and it's happiness, and it's health, and it's joy, and it's love, and it's peace. That's God's will for us. But we have to align ourselves with that. And that's part of the practice we did today. The German word for it is einstellen, and one of the meanings of it is to align. So I would language it that Christ came to give us a world peace plan. And the good news that he came was that it will happen. The how and the when, that's where free will comes in. But that's what I consider to be the good news, that everyone and everything will be deemed. As it's written in the Bible, it's called the reconciliation of all things. Who can even fathom that? The reconciliation of all things, the healing of all things, not some things. That's beyond my human comprehension, and I've been meditating on this for almost 2 decades, but I can't even fathom what that would be like. Really good. And so that's why we need to turn to a higher power, because it's not, yes, we'll each have our part in that, but our part is to tune into infinity and then act to infinite love and then act based on that. The reconciliation of all things, heaven on earth, complete freedom from suffering. For that, we need a higher power, friends. And to access that higher power, we have to have absolute faith and trust in it. And so my prayer is that this gathering was one step forward I know it was for me, and my prayer is that it's one step closer to that for each person who's watched this. So I'm going to close this out with a prayer. Beloved Maker, Source Love, Heavenly Father, our dear friend Bruno Gröning, who said that Jesus, that Christ was our supreme friend and the supreme spiritual healer. Please, the highest blessing for everyone who participated or watches this video, please help us to recognize our need, our absolute need for God and nature. Please help us to take up the spiritual path with all of our being. Please help us to recognize that God is goodness and only wants goodness and happiness for us. Please help us to take a spiritual view of our challenges and challenges in the world, that they're not punishments, they're simply merely consequences. They're reaping of negative actions that we've all sown. And please help us to seek more and more connection to, communion with, trust in, and being guided by God. Thank you so much for joining in, everyone. Thanks for saying hi. Love the Lord. Great to see you back. Hey, Gerald. Hey, Jisoo. Hug received and returned, forever loving everything. Thank you so much for joining in. Take care. So much love.